Whenever we try to map out the geography of the Jeffrey Epstein case, the pins on the board are usually pretty fixed. You have the massive townhouse in Manhattan, the one with the heated sidewalks. You have the estate in Palm Beach, the Zorro Ranch out in New Mexico, and obviously the most infamous of them all, Little St. James, down in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
The big four, essentially. Those are the locations that dominate, all the documentaries and the court filings.
Exactly. They're the landmarks everyone knows. But today, we are spinning the globe and pointing to a location that gets mentioned a lot less. It usually shows up as a footnote or maybe a background detail in a photo. But when you actually look at the data, and I mean really look at it, this place might be one of the most significant pieces of the entire puzzle. We are going to North Africa.
Specifically Morocco. And you're right, in the mainstream narrative, it often gets treated as like a random vacation spot, a place they went for a week to ride camels and take pictures. But when you really dig into the documentation, which is exactly what we're doing today, it stops looking like a holiday destination and starts looking like a structural part of the network.
It is a fascinating pivot. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a specific stack of sources. We're going way beyond the headlines here. We're looking at hard, undeniable evidence like pilot flight logs and court depositions, and we're cross-referencing those with some really intense investigative reporting coming out of Moroccan media outlets, sources most people in the West haven't seen. We want to answer one simple but heavy question. What exactly was Jeffrey Epstein doing in Morocco?
And to answer that, we have to establish a bit of a ground rule here. It's what I like to call the evidence hierarchy.
Okay.
Because in the stack of sources we have for this deep dive, not all documents are created equal, and we need to be disciplined about how we weigh them.
I love this concept. Let's break it down. How should you, the listener, be filtering what you're about to hear?
Think of it like a pyramid. At the very top, the peak, you have primary materials. These are documents produced in litigation or official government records.
So the flight logs?
The pilot flight logs, the actual handwritten or typed manifests, and sworn depositions where someone is testifying under penalty of perjury.
So these are facts in the legal sense. If the log says the plane landed at a specific time, the plane landed. If a witness says, I was there under oath, that carries real legal weight.
Exactly. It's the bedrock. Now, below that, we have reported claims. This is where things get interesting, but we have to be careful. This includes investigative journalism that cites emails or government letters that are currently behind, Department of Justice access gates.
Right. So these are documents that exist in the legal files, but they haven't been released to the public yet.
We can't see the raw PDF ourselves, but credible reporters are describing what's in them.
Precisely. It's the difference between we can see the signature with our own eyes and a reporter we trust saw the signature and wrote about it.
And there is one more crucial caveat we need to keep in front of us. Just because a prominent name appears in a flight log, that indicates a claimed association in the record. It is not by itself proof of criminal conduct by that passenger.
That is a vital distinction. We're mapping the network and the movement, not necessarily, adjudicating every single person's actions. We're looking at the system.
Exactly. We have to be surgical about what the documents actually say versus what people assume they say.
Okay. Precision is key. So let's start at the very top of that pyramid with the hard evidence. We have the pilot logs, often grimly referred to as the Lolita Express logs.
Yeah.
When we strip away all the noise, what do we actually see?
Well, it's not just a stray flight here or there, which is what I think many people assume. We see a repeated systematic pattern of entry and exit using specific ICAO airport codes.
ICAO codes, those are the four-letter identifiers pilots use, right?
Right. So instead of just seeing Morocco written on a notepad, you see the specific airport logistics. For example, as early as July 2000, we see flights recorded explicitly into Marrakesh code GMMX and Fez code GMFF.
So the footprint is established as early as 2000. That's what is earlier than I expected, significantly before the legal troubles really started in Florida.
It accelerates. We move to March 2001 and we see flights into Tangier, GMTT, and then again in July 2002, there's a very specific, very complex itinerary moving from Nice, France, down to Tangier, and then hopping over to Rabat, code GMME.
Hold on a second. We've got Marrakesh, Fez, Tangier, and Rabat. That's not just visiting one resort. That's a comprehensive tour of the country.
It is. And look at the geography. Marrakesh is the tourist hub, the luxury center.
Got it.
Fez is the cultural, sort of spiritual center. Tangier is a totally different vibe, historically very international, right across from Spain. And Rabat,
That's the capital.
that's the diplomatic capital. The fact that the plane is moving between these very distinct hubs tells us this wasn't just sitting by a pool for a week.
It suggests meetings. It suggests a circuit.
The takeaway here is that Morocco wasn't just a rumor. The aviation records prove it was a repeated arrival and departure point over a 3-year period. This was a verified destination.
Okay, so the plane was there, the hardware was on the ground. The next logical question, and probably the most contentious one, is who was on the plane?
And this is where the forensic work gets fascinating because we can start cross-referencing. We can take the logs and overlay them with testimony.
Right.
Let's look at that March 2001 timeframe again. We have a flight log entry for March 8, 2001, going from Granada, Spain, down to Tangier. And listed right there on the passenger line is Virginia Roberts.
That's Virginia Giuffre, the primary accuser in the Maxwell case.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, seeing a name in a log is one thing, but what makes this evidentiary gold is that we can stack it against her sworn deposition from the Giuffre v. Maxwell civil case.
This is the primary material synergy you were just talking about.
Exactly. In that testimony, under oath, she explicitly describes a 6-week trip with Epstein in 2001, and she specifically lists Tangier, Morocco as one of the stops.
That is a massive corroboration. You have the paper trail from 2001, and then you have her years later under the pressure of a legal deposition recalling that specific location. It matches.
It moves it from an allegation to a corroborated fact. She was there, the timeline holds up, and it establishes that victims were being transported to this location.
Now, there is another name in the sources that jumps out on these Morocco flights, and it's one that always generates a lot of headlines. We have to talk about the entry from July 2002.
Right. This is the flight involving that Tangier to Rabat leg we mentioned. On the same flight log page documenting that itinerary, the adjacent passenger list includes President Clinton, along with Secret Service personnel.
Okay, let's apply our rules here immediately. We need to be responsible. What does this actually tell us?
We have to be very rigorous. The source material, the flight log itself, connects Clinton to that Morocco leg. It places him on the aircraft for that travel. It establishes an association and a presence.
But to be clear, the log itself is not an allegation of specific illegal conduct.
Correct. The log itself is a record of transport. It tells us he was part of that travel group in July 2002, visiting the capital, Rabat. It doesn't tell us what happened in the meetings, but it does establish the level of access Epstein had. He wasn't just a rich guy, he was a guy who could fly a former U.S. president into a foreign capital.
It paints a pretty vivid picture. You have vulnerable young women like Virginia Giuffre on one trip and a former U.S. president on another.
It creates a very confusing high-level cover for whatever else was happening. And that actually leads us to the next layer. Because you don't just fly to Tangier and Rabat repeatedly unless you have people on the ground.
Right. You need a social infrastructure. You need someone to pick you up, someone to host the dinner.
Exactly. Who was meeting the plane?
The sources mention a social anchor in Tangier. Who are we talking about?
The flight logs actually give us the first clue. On that March 8, 2001 flight to Tangier, the same one with Virginia Roberts, we see the names Alberto and Linda Pinto.
The Pintos. Who are they?
They were world-renowned interior designers, extremely high society. We're talking about people who design interiors for private jets, mega yachts, and palaces. According to investigative reporting from the Moroccan outlet Le Desk, the Pintos were described as Epstein's privileged contacts in the country.
Privileged contacts. That sounds like more than just casual acquaintances.
The reporting suggests that Tangier wasn't just a refueling stop. It was a hub where Epstein had a pre-existing social network. He lands, and he's immediately plugged into the glitzy surface level of Tangier society.
So he has the cover. He has the legitimacy. If anyone asks, what are you doing here? He can say, I'm visiting my friends, the famous designers.
Exactly. It validates his presence, but the sources also point to something much darker happening within that social environment.
This brings us to the Daniel Syed reporting.
Yes. This comes from a very recent analysis that cites declassified DOJ emails. The reporting claims that a man named Daniel Syed, who is characterized as a facilitator, traveled to Morocco. And the report specifies a very disturbing detail. He was there during Ramadan to recruit models.
Recruit models. In the context of this case, that is the ultimate red flag. We know what that means.
It's the euphemism we've seen time and again. The reporting claims Syed was there to source victims. The emails allegedly discuss connecting with a head of young Moroccan students to find the best models.
That is just chilling. So If we put the Pintos and this Daniel Syed report together, what are we looking at?
It implies that Morocco served a dual purpose. On one hand, you have the high society legitimacy flying in with presidents, dining with designers. But beneath that, the reporting suggests Morocco was viewed as a sourcing environment, a place to recruit new victims into the network.
It's that duality that is so disturbing. The glamour and the predation happening in the same zip code.
And that duality persists right up until the end, because the sources show a massive time jump that I think is the most surprising part of this whole file.
Yeah, I was expecting this to be an early 2000s story. But the sources take us from those early flights all the way to 2017, 2018, and even 2019.
Right. We usually hear about Epstein's final years being focused on New York or Paris, but the late-stage files suggest he was looking at Morocco in a completely different way, not just as a playground, but as a safe haven.
This is where that investigative reporting becomes crucial again. They detail a specific plot by Epstein to acquire real estate. And we aren't talking about a condo.
No. The sources identify the location as Bin Anakil in the Palmeraie district of Marrakesh.
The Palmeraie, what kind of place is this?
Think of it as the Beverly Hills of Morocco, but more secluded. It's a vast palm oasis on the edge of the city. Huge estates, high walls, incredible privacy. It's where the ultra-wealthy go to disappear.
And Epstein was trying to buy in.
Aggressively. The reporting cites dozens of emails where Epstein is requesting walkthrough videos, photos, and discussing price comparables for a massive palace in this district.
But why? He already had homes everywhere. Why buy a palace in Marrakesh in 2017 or 18?
The analysis in the sources suggests this was strategic. This wasn't just adding to his portfolio. The emails reportedly discuss political risk and extradition complexity.
Whoa, extradition complexity. That's not real estate talk. That's legal defense talk.
Precisely. The implication is that Epstein was analyzing Morocco not just as a place to relax, but as a fallback residence, a contingency plan.
He was building an escape hatch.
That's what it looks like, and what's chilling is how close he came to potentially using it. The sources discuss a specific event in April 2019.
April 2019. Okay, let's anchor the timeline here. This is just 3 months before he was arrested. The walls were closing in.
Exactly. He was under immense pressure. And in the middle of that, there was a reported official letter from Morocco's DGSN, their National Security Directorate. This document confirms that Jeffrey Epstein transited through Marrakech Menara Airport on April 25, 2019.
So he was physically there in April of 2019.
According to the reporting on that security letter, yes. It describes this as being among his last trips abroad.
That gives me chills. If you connect the dots, the attempt to buy a remote palace, the emails about extradition, and then a physical trip just weeks before the net closed.
It paints a picture of someone who was looking for an exit door. He was checking the locks.
It really makes you wonder, if that deal had gone through a few months faster, would the end of this story have been completely different?
It's a valid question. We know he eventually returned to the U.S., where he was arrested, but the sources show he was actively setting up the infrastructure to not have to do that.
Okay, let's zoom out. We've gone through a lot of data here. When you synthesize all of this, what is the Morocco connection, really?
I think if we look at the evidence holistically, we can identify 3 distinct roles that Morocco played. It wasn't just one thing. It evolved.
Okay, let's walk through them. Role number 1.
First, it was a destination. The pilot logs from 2000 to 2002 prove this. Marrakesh, Fez, Tangier. He was there repeatedly. It was on the map.
Verified by the hard data. Simple enough. Role number 2.
Second, and more darkly, it was a network node. It wasn't just a place to visit. It was a place to operate. You have the social cover from people like the Pintos, and you have the allegations of recruitment linked to facilitators like Daniel Syed.
So a place where business, his specific brand of terrible business, was conducted. And the third role?
The third role is a contingency. This is the 2017 to 2019 phase, the attempt to buy the palace, the analysis of risk. Morocco was being groomed as a sanctuary, a place to go when the legal protections in the U.S. and Europe started to fail.
It's terrifying to think about how calculated it all was. This wasn't accidental tourism. It was systematic.
Systematic is the word. The deeper you dive into these files, the less random it all appears. Every stop, every passenger, every real estate inquiry, it seems to have had a purpose.
And that's what makes this Morocco file so essential. It reminds us that this wasn't just an American crime story. It was a global operation.
Absolutely. And as more of these documents legally declassify, because remember, we are still seeing only a fraction of the record, I suspect we're going to find that the map of this network is much larger than we thought.
You know, what sticks with me is that April 2019 date. He's in Marrakesh. He's looking for a palace. He knows the FBI is looking at him. It almost feels like a movie script.
And he didn't stay. He left Marrakesh. But the intent to establish that base in North Africa seems undeniable based on the reporting.
So we leave you with this thought. The history books record Epstein being arrested at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. That's the end of the line. But the sources suggest that if things had gone slightly differently, if a real estate deal had closed, we might be looking at a completely different legal standoff today.
It raises the question, how close did the network actually come to shifting its entire base of operations to North Africa permanently?
That is a question that definitely lingers. We've unpacked the logs, the testimonies, and the reports, and the picture is clear. Morocco was a lot more than just a stopover. It was a key piece of the puzzle. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.